Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. If you're joining us for the very first time today, this is an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to learn about what's going on in the world of data science at different companies across different industries. And these sessions are recorded and they are shared to the Posit YouTube, which is the first time I'm referring to something as Posit, which is exciting too. So you can always go back and rewatch or find helpful resources there as well. Together, we're all dedicated to creating a welcoming environment for everyone. And we love when everybody can participate and we can hear from everyone, no matter your level of experience or area of work. So there's always 3 ways that you can ask questions today and also provide your perspective. It doesn't just have to be questions. You can jump in by raising your hand on Zoom. You could put questions into the Zoom chat and feel free to just put a little star there if you want me to read it out loud instead. And then we also have our Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too, if you prefer to ask there. I did want to also mention the team at Lander Analytics had recently just shared with me the R in Government conference, which is happening in, I think, about a month now, in December, the 1st of December. And they gave me a 20% promo discount for anybody in this group who's interested in going to that conference too. So I'll share it here in the chat. I just wanted to mention it if it's of interest to anybody. But yes, going back to the normal spiel, we do also have a LinkedIn group for the Hangout. So if it helps you connect with people or you want to continue a discussion, you can do so there as well. And our team will share that in the chat in just a second. But for today, I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host and our friend from the Hangout here, Alan Schussman. Alan is data science and engineering team leader at Gore Associates. And Alan, I know you've been here with us quite a few weeks, but I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role and maybe something you like to do outside of work too.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm sure we'll get into lots of details about the role, so I won't deep dive into that quite yet. But yeah, I work for Gore Associates. Gore is the company that folks probably know from Gore-Tex. In Flagstaff, in Arizona, Gore researches and designs and manufactures medical devices, primarily endovascularly implanted devices for a variety of cardiovascular diseases. And I have landed for the last handful of years in this role as a data team leader. Lots of trajectory of change of that team and the role over the last handful of years. And we can dig into that. I've been in Flagstaff. I live in Flagstaff. I've been here for longer than I realize. Each time I think about how long I've been here. I've been in Flagstaff about 17 years now, and it's a great town. We're having our first winter storm of the year right now. Prior to coming to Gore, I did a PhD in sociology, and then thought about, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And so here I am. Yeah, I'll pause there, and I can talk a bunch more about the team that I'm on, about Gore MPD and how we fit into things, or happy to kind of head in any direction that folks are interested in talking about, and eager for feedback and stuff from the team here.
Awesome, thanks, Alan. And I know in your free time, maybe paddleboarding is one of the things that you.
Yeah, it's so dry here. Our little reservoir has been really depressing this summer, so I didn't get out much. Free time, I walk the dog in the woods a lot. I like to take pictures. A whole bunch of my hobby time is R coding in the service of doing things that are sometimes useful with the Destiny 2 API. That's a lot of my hobby time, is video game plus data. Yeah, that's fun.
Cool. Well, I know you have a little bit of a different title than some of the leaders we've had on before, and you manage both data science and engineering teams. And I was just curious to learn a little bit about that experience and kind of what your team looks like too.
Yeah, sure. So my team, the work that my team primarily does is data engineering. We are part of, and I guess this is, sort of primer on the team in general. In the past year and a half, we've switched from being a sales and marketing oriented analytics team to being a divisionally facing team. And so in that time, we've taken on a ton of the broad team of which we're a part has grown tremendously, and my team has grown a bunch. I think the way to understand my team is like pragmatic data engineering along a very broad continuum. So there is some of what I think we would think of as data science in that work, insofar as we're asked to do some things around segmentation and do some modeling. But a lot of those things are for us kind of applications and methodologies that are waiting for the right business cases to really put them to use. And so we are really heavily focused on getting data to a broad team of analysts who need to do all kinds of different things with it. And we have both brought up and also sort of inherited, as teams have come to us, a really broad set of applications to do that with, of platforms and technologies. And so we are both, so when I say this is pragmatic data engineering, we are solving problems as fast as we can. We're gaining credibility as we do that. As we do that, the team gets to grow, and we get to think about where do we want to strategically go? How do we want to be strategic about our platforms and things, while still being really, really heavily focused on getting data stuff done for our really, really diverse set of customers and constituents. And so the folks on my team some of them have formal data science training in terms of accreditations and degrees. There's a mix of folks who come from different kinds of software engineering backgrounds, and let's see who else is on the team, and folks who come from more business-facing sort of backgrounds, who came into analytics by virtue of kind of being analysts and developing in really technical directions. So it's a really broad team, and we're all focused on different kinds of applications and solutions of making data available, sometimes through a bunch of really complex mechanics for our set of end users, who again are going to do all kinds of different things with it. And so we're sort of at the crux of this operation of data problem solving, and it's really exciting. And as I said, as we're growing, we're getting some opportunity that we haven't had in the past to try to be more strategic about how do we want to grow, what kinds of tools do we want to use, how will we use them, what kinds of processes will we have, those kinds of things. So it's we're kind of racing to do good stuff for the business, and also for me, I really want to sort of do well by the folks on my team and give them paths that let them grow in ways that they're interested in growing, and that's where we're looking to some sort of aspirational data science kind of future states, I guess.
Absolutely. And when you say end users across the company, who is that, or who are the different teams that you work with?
So we have kind of a couple of maybe concentric rings. We have our broad MPD analytics team is a team now of about 50 or so. My team is about 7, and the rest of those 50 people are analysts and others who are affiliated with, we kind of have dotted functional lines to different kinds of functions within the organization. So they're connected to sales and marketing, they're connected to supply chain and manufacturing, they're connected to quality and regulatory. And they're largely analysts who have responsibilities to their teams to produce analyses of different kinds, monitoring data, strategic planning information, those kinds of things. And so my team helps to feed capabilities to them, and then also work as project partners with them on the various things that they need to do. And then so we are all part of one big NPD analytics team, but our sort of customer facing orientations are all really different. And my team is the one that sort of spans all of those pillars of different functional and business teams, which means we get to see and do a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I see, Livy, you asked a question. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any engineering or IT background before you came into this, or if you just kind of like grew into that at Gore, because I know sociology has quantitative elements to it, right? So I'm sure you already had some of that stuff. What was your kind of journey into the engineering side?
Yeah, I guess there's a story there. You're absolutely right. I mean, the Soc background was the thing that I presented as a way to say, hey, I could be not an academic, and not an academic could look like a bunch of the following things. I could work with data. I could do stats. I could do some, programming of different kinds. I could do research. So my entry into Gore was kind of pitching myself to the clinical research team. And that's where I started in Gore as a clinical data manager. So I was doing, data collection design for clinical studies, essentially, and then monitoring of data as it came in and those kinds of things. And so the through line there was, hey, I could understand how research works, albeit in a really different field, and can figure out how to work with data in various ways. Okay, I could be a data manager. My jump from there at Gore was into an IT role so I sort of translated those kinds of things into saying, hey, I could fill a new commitment here that has to do with strategic planning of IT stuff for the clinical team. That role, and that was a business partner role. And that role gradually expanded to doing IT strategy things for our whole division, which gave me lots of exposure to different businesses, as well as the different kinds of businesses and functions, as well as the different kinds of technical needs that they had. So I got to see what our scientists need to work with in terms of technical tools and things like that, as well as exposure to sales and marketing and so on. So I mean, that, and then at some point I said, hey, I sort of am ready to do something new, and an opportunity came along to join this then very, very small analytics team that was trying to figure things out. And I jumped on it. But so no, like that's the really, really long answer to your question of like, no, I'm not trained as a software engineer, or as, I don't know, probably any of the things I do day to day, but there's a sort of through line from the stuff I've done along the way that has helped me kind of figure it out as I go, I guess, enough to be okay at it, and to be successful at it sometimes. If there's any through line, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for, working with these technical tools that I get rewarded by finding success in, and gradually getting better enough at those that I can do more complex things, I guess. And now as a leader, I think that's a whole new space of learning for me, is how to, what does successful leadership look like? And so I'm working on figuring that out.
That's one of my favorite things at the Hangouts, is learning like people's journey to get to the role that they're in now. And then it's not always like you have exactly the role that you, or the degree that you would think you would have. Data science. I see Mubanga, you had asked a question a bit earlier too. Do you want to jump in?
Thank you, Rachel. So I just wanted to understand from Alan what certifications are in his team, because he did touch on that when he started the talk.
Did you say education?
I think so. The certifications.
Accreditations. I think you mentioned that accreditations. Yes.
Yeah. So people are interested in. I think there's a range there. So one of the folks on the team has done a data science master's degree, and I think that's the most. That's sort of the I don't know, kind of top end of formal training. Lots of other folks have done some coursework, some amount of kind of independent training of different kinds of things. And then, more generally, folks we have a great mix. I have a mechanical engineer on my team. I have, folks who do physical engineering, and that's really cool. And then this, range of folks with other kinds of backgrounds and experiences. But so the most anyone on the team has done formally in terms of data science training would be something like a data science master's right now. Does that help fill in, Lubanga, what you were interested in knowing, or were you interested specifically in any more of those details?
It does. It does, because that's the kind of mix that we normally see even in this part of the world. We have different backgrounds and all fitting into the team to give a very nice heterogeneous mix of skills.
Yeah, and I kind of reflecting on that a little bit. When I came into this role, we had a definition for this data engineer role that really emphasized the technical kind of accreditation. I have really intentionally cast a broader net than I think we started with, based on the idea that I think people can be successful coming from a bunch of places, and we really depend on a deep understanding of our businesses and our functions, for example. And I believe that lots and lots of people can learn the technical pieces, but there's a business aptitude, there's a sophistication around how people interact and solve problems that I think has been a really, really important part of building my team. And I think I can see that as part of our broader success. That accreditation is one thing, and it demonstrates a particular kind of capability that's important. But for me, at least, I really don't want it to be the only one.
Alan, I know you mentioned this briefly in the beginning, but like one of the parts of your role that you really enjoy is like helping develop your team and helping them be successful. And I'd love to chat a little bit about that and hear like what you're learning in this role, or what has been most helpful.
Yeah, so I guess as framework, I can say Gore as a company takes that kind of development really seriously. And so we have some formal processes that try to structure our approach to it. So I have some help organizationally in the fact that there's always a little bit of a reminder that, hey, we're coming through our cycle of doing development planning with our teams and making sure that we're thinking about it and talking about it. So the formal element has to do with trying to do good planning with people about what are they interested in and where do they want to go, and having realistic conversations about, okay, are the things you're interested in things that we need right now? If so, great. Let's connect you to those and make sure that your skills are developing in a way that feels rewarding and that is also getting things done for our business. And so we have a real deliberate process of having those conversations and setting goals that try to, smart goals that try to work along that path, so that a couple times a year we can say, hey, you're checking things off on your plan. That could feel good, and let's celebrate. We really try intentionally to do that. So for me, I think that one of the things that I'm learning that I have to figure out how to do well, especially as the team grows, is how to balance having a vision for where we want to go technically, and also letting my team develop that and run with it. A year and a half ago, we were a team of 3, and all 3 of us could be really deep in just about everything we did. And so one of the big pivots for me is going, okay, now we're working with 5 or 6 different functions. We have a lot more work than I can technically lead anymore. My role is different than it was a year and a half ago. And I can still be really invested in the technical solutions and the writing code that is really rewarding for me. But the future direction of the team, I've got to let them own. And so figuring out how to do that, that's one of the things for my development this year that's really important for me, is figuring out how to have a vision, get buy-in for the vision, and then let them run with it and really be successful with it. Because my success is they're doing good work that is really rewarding, and that, you know, ultimately we have to get our business needs done. But success for us as a team, I think, will feel really, really great when they feel like their skills are developing and they're doing things that are meaningful to them in ways that they want to work. So I'm working on all of that balance.
And those conversations with them about like their own skills development and their own career growth, are those like separate calls that the like company has like scheduled, like annual review type things? Are they part of a normal one-on-one process?
A little bit of both. The process itself has its own kind of cadence and milestones. And so we try to, you know, work, but I think we try to make that dedicated time. You know, I have weekly or biweekly catch-ups with folks on the team, and we can check in on those things at those points in time. But we really also want to have dedicated time to say, like, all right, let's look at your plan. Let's talk about your plan. And then there are also other inputs from other places in Gore. Gore has an idea of sponsors, and sponsors are generally a person who's not your leader, who also has a commitment to that kind of success. So there are multiple places where, as an associate, you can get that feedback. And one of my roles is to try to help identify those goals, and then, you know, support people through working towards them.
Thank you. I see there's a few questions in the chat, and one is, I'm not sure if your name is shared there, but it says S. So I could start to read the question, or if you want to jump in and read it.
Thanks. Yeah, I was wondering if someone with limited data engineering experience would apply for a data engineering role in your team. What kind of skills, experiences, etc. would you tend to look for or find convincing?
Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I have to give some caveat that you know, those skills I do think are important. I just don't think that they're the only sort of thing that gets you in, that can get you in the door. So, for example, you know, working as we have people who are successful on our broad team who come from analyst backgrounds of all different kinds and from tools backgrounds of all different kinds, and they can be successful there. And I think that applies to a team like mine as well. I do think that there's you know, there's an element of being competitive for these kinds of roles that really is rooted in some core kind of technical foundations. But for example, like, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. You can be really technical, but not a good problem solver. And we really need people who can learn the technical things, but can come in with a perspective on, like, what does solving problems well look like? And I guess I'm thinking of you know, you can be really technical, but inflexible, I'll say, in how you solve problems. And that's a really, really hard way to be successful, because you can't, there's a whole lot of what we do in our work that has to do with, you know, we're satisficing. We're getting to a good enough solution that folks can do work with that we know we want to improve later. And I think a lot of technical work, a lot of technical training is sometimes a little too black and white for being able to compromise about, this is good data and my customers can work with it, and I'll come back and I'll help improve it for the next cycle. You've got to be able to compromise. I think you've got to be able to talk well through problems. And I think you've got to be able to feel embedded with your customers so that you're a partner to them and not just a technical service. I think that's where you can come into roles like on teams like mine, but also I guess I'd encourage you, there are lots of analytical and technical roles that don't necessarily look like data engineering, but that are still doing analytical work. And there's a whole bunch of space there where I think the landscape is even more broad for success without coming necessarily from you know, what we would look at as the, you know, typical like, you know, like data engineer, software engineer, data scientist background.
Thanks. Maybe just a follow-up question. When you were talking about solving problems or like communicating with coworkers a certain way, then I guess to show that, I would talk about like previous experiences, or maybe show how I creatively solve a problem in my projects or something like that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the things, you know, being able to get that. I'm thinking of like interviews that I've been part of that have been really fun. You see people light up when they say, I solved this problem and it involved a bunch of different kinds of cooperation and I got to be creative. You know, seeing that is really, really fun. And that's the kind of thing that I think helps you, you know, in processes that I think have worked well. It helps people really stand out, is to be able to describe the kinds of things that you were describing.
I see Javier had a comment that I'm trying to catch up and read what everybody's commenting on, but there seems like there's a lot of +1s to it. So Javier, do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Rachel. Alan, I really love your position on how to have how to grow like a balanced, diverse data science org or engineering org. And I don't feel like most hiring managers out there kind of share your same thoughts. And yeah, I proposed it would be awesome if you wrote like a Medium post, or, you know, if you have a personal blog, if you wrote some kind of post on this, because I think the more and more voices are out there, like publicly saying, you know, we don't need to hire PhDs for a growing team exclusively. You know, it would just be a win-win for everybody. But yeah, thank you. I've loved your feedback.
Thanks. No, I really, really appreciate that. That's great. That's super affirming for me. So I'm grateful for that input. I do. Yeah, I think I do look around. You know, I've had conversations with folks doing like data science certificates of different kinds, and I do. This probably ranges a little bit, kind of around with your comment a little bit, Javier. But I think I don't always know if we do a service to people the way we set them up for what we, as an industry, data science tends to look like. I know my team is unique in the way that we're positioned within our organization. Right, there's a whole bunch of our founding conditions that describe how we get to where we are. Right. And so I know there are lots of teams that do look like that sort of archetypical data science org, but I don't know if it's the right expectation for people going through data science training to have their eyes on, you know, the like machine learning engineer kind of career, for example. You know, there aren't a ton of them. The applications are pretty specific. We're a pretty sophisticated business, and we're trying to figure out what some of those things mean to us and how to effectively use them. And don't get me wrong, I'm really excited for my team to be where we develop that expertise. But without the business need, it's not fair for me to tell people like, come join my team and be a data scientist the way that sort of the world says data science looks. It's going to be technical, it's going to be interesting, it's going to be rewarding, but it's different from that other picture. And that's, I think we have to be realistic, and I don't think there's any reason we can't make people really excited about that kind of work. It's really cool work. It's really complex. The problems to solve are really fun. The platforms we get to work with are really cool. But it looks a little different. And so I think we have to be realistic, and I think I think this expansive view of, and I'm kind of going on and on, but so as a job code, the folks on my team are data scientists. That's what we call them in PeopleSoft. And I think that's but the work right now that we talk about and that I hire people for is data engineering. And so what I like that we've set up is we've got a lot of runway for folks with a broad set of skills to come into my team. I have to be really realistic about what I promise the work is going to look like and when, so that we're not bringing in people who have a very particular vision of data science that we just can't offer. There are other places that can. I would love for folks on my team to be able to do that kind of work when we're ready for it and when we've got the skill, but we're on a path.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that comment. I really, really appreciate it.
I see there was an anonymous question a bit earlier that was, I work at an investment bank and everything in reporting is mainly run in Excel. What helped you in connecting R and or Python to your company's database?
Maybe I should talk about our infrastructure a little bit. I said that we're pragmatic data engineering. And so some of that means for some projects, it makes sense to connect to some databases and do some transformations with Python and produce something on the other end. The biggest kind of piece of infrastructure that we have in place right now is a set of integrations, not written in Python, that build in conjunction with a bunch of other mechanics, build a big data mart that feed a significant population of our analysts who use Tableau against it. So, I guess to get back to the question, how have we had success doing something like that? I guess we've had success where it made sense for the use case to do data pulls using Python. I bring in R whenever I get to sit down and do something because I like to work with it. But again, it's the sort of the right tool for the job. And one of the jobs that we've had over the last several years is bringing together a bunch of data from some complex data sources, having a pretty deep business understanding, and helping to feed this big data mart. That's pretty, it's not the thing necessarily that you put like on the data science recruiting poster, but it's really, really critical. And the folks who have done that work are hugely talented and absolutely critical for our team's success, and have, I think, developed as part of that program a ton of really great skills. So I guess, I don't know if this is a good answer to the original question. I would say if Python connecting to finance data as an alternative to spreadsheets helps get the work done that you need to get done, that's the case that you make to anybody who you need to get buy-in or permission from or whatever. And if in that method you can then render out the kind of data products that your customers need, then it's success. And then you've got a cycle where you can say, hey, I worked through this Python-oriented method to provide data to customers. It worked. Let's expand the scope. Let's upscale the number of people who rely on this, and so on. So I hope that's kind of speaking to that question. I don't know if it is. Rachel, I don't remember who asked it.
I think it is. It was anonymous.
More about
it was anonymous.
Okay.
But I think it is. I love Libby's comment too, which goes along with that. It's like data science is not one thing. And I'm thinking that might be the title of this conversation on YouTube. Daniel, I see you had asked a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So it was really just going back to a comment that you had made about kind of balancing. I think when you had first mentioned it, balancing kind of like the vision aspects of a leader and the kind of like the technical expertise that people in these roles generally have. And so really I was just hoping that you could elaborate that a little bit more and kind of like how you handle that balance the general background being where I am, generally speaking, the higher up you go, the less technical you are in terms of just kind of like title. And I'm kind of at the first inflection point now where I'm beginning that transition from kind of like person who is turned to for a lot of technical things to being more kind of like the people leader. And that balance is something I struggle with.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think I'm feeling a lot of that same thing. For me, I think a big part of the reason the work is rewarding is being technical. And so selfishly, I don't want to work myself out of a job that is at least somehow hands-on. And I think I'm working on figuring out how to like influence with some kind of vision, but also being really open to, well, what are the tools that the folks on my team want to use? What's going to be rewarding for them, and sort of letting them run. So maybe there's kind of a path there where, you know, if I'm maybe part of the technical piece is for me is figuring out like what's the potential solution space, and I need to be able to understand that enough that I can be like an advocate for the kinds of tools that people want to use, and understand them well enough to, you know, do administrative things like make investment forecasts, like how much is this going to cost, and can we afford it? Should we afford it? Right? Those still require me being technical enough to understand the payoff and the constraints and the costs and benefits and things like that. I mean, I'm really, really lucky right now in that I can be strategic and I can go into conversations about our like enterprise global analytics direction, and I hope be influential on behalf of my team. And then in the afternoon, I can look at code with someone on my team, and we can sort of ideate together, like what does a good solution look like? That kind of, being able to do both of those is just great. And so, you know, I would hope that I don't end up in a role where I don't get to have that mix. So I guess, you know, ultimately, I think I'm really sympathetic to the kind of position you're in right now, Daniel, of like, what does good people leadership look like? And is that rewarding while at the same time being able to be technical and hands-on? And I think I'm lucky in my organization that I'm able to do some balancing of it. And I hope I can continue to figure it out and hope to do it well. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, understood. Thanks very much. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. I see Marlene, you had asked a question as well. You want to jump in?
Sure. Hi, Alan. We're twinning, by the way. Yay. Truth bomb, I kind of hate project management. I kind of do. Like, I really enjoy rolling up my sleeves and getting dirty with the data, right? So it doesn't mean that I'm not good at it or I can't do it, but I struggle with, hey, is this something I really should kind of get some formal training with? And, or, I mean, I imagine anybody in the data space at some point might consider having people work under them. You obviously have a team under you. I'm just playing with the idea of, do I actually go out and get formal training for project management? I think managing employees is probably something that's worth looking at to understand like good dynamics and hierarchy and managing personalities. But my question to you was, what part of your role, since you're there, did you prepare for, or maybe you had some aptitude for, excuse me, going into it? And then what did you feel like you kind of needed, and or maybe even your company just said, Alan, you're assuming this role, here's what this training that you got to do now in order to assume this role. That's kind of my thought process.
That last bit implies a lot of organization upfront about knowing what to tell people they now need to do. A lot of leadership at Gore is kind of evolving into a commitment that may be expanding, and then learning what are all the things that you don't, what are all the organizational things that you had no idea about. You know, I've had to learn, like, how do I make a budget forecast? Fortunately, I have good, my team leader, the person who provides leadership to me, is really, really supportive of like helping me figure those things out. But that's not universal. And a lot of those things, I think you sort of stumble along. My prior IT roles were a little bit closer to, not formally, but in function, I had to do a lot of sort of portfolio planning. And also at various points, I was everything from a project manager to just a team member or a champion of a project. But I never had any formal like project management training either. And so I learned a lot from other parts of our organization that do that work and that evolved sort of in parallel with my moving through various roles. So, you know, we could look to a project management organization to understand some elements of planning, and to occasionally even like tap into their resources. I think one thing that, as we've grown from a sales and marketing oriented function to a divisionally oriented function, a capability gap that I'm learning how to fill now is, how do I understand what everybody needs from us, how to make good predictions about when we can do the work, how long it will take, how many resources we'll need, et cetera, and have that be more than just a really wild guess. You know, that's one of the things that I think will be really, really key for us. But again, I'm not trained. There are certifications in that stuff for sure. I think a team like ours could use probably a dedicated person, but we're not able to dedicate those resources. One of the things from a call 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Toronto health system folks, I think they described it. When their team formed, they had a portfolio manager or someone to that effect. That to me is would be such an important kind of founding condition for success going forward, to say from the jump, we want to have people who are helping us to organize this portfolio of work. I think my experience across a bunch of roles is it's really hard to come too late, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be thoughtful about it.
That is super helpful. I really appreciate all those comments. And I think you're right on the coming late to the show, because people get real set in their ways and management does not like to kind of have somebody come in, and it's like herding cats, right? They don't want their stuff messed with or their toys played with. So yeah, I appreciate that so much. Thank you. That definitely answers my question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Tiffany, there's a lot of great questions coming in too. And I think, Tiffany, you asked one a little bit earlier. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I had a recent discussion with a hiring manager. I'm looking for a job, put that out there. And it was for like the senior data analyst position. And they were kind of concerned that like me being more of a data scientist, that I would be kind of bored with doing the data analyst role. And you talked about how your team, I guess their titles would be data scientists, but they're more data engineers. And I guess, what do you think the differences are between those?
Good question. There's a whole lot there that I think is pretty loaded. I guess I had a similar conversation in hiring at one point about basically the end of which was saying, hey, I don't think it's the question about like are you overqualified? Are you going to get bored? Like I think that's for your that's for you to think about. I think if we take seriously people who are interested in our roles, we ought to think about like, are they qualified for this work, and trust that they are when they apply for our jobs, that they're interested in them, I guess. So I guess, but that's a little kind of orthogonal to the question about the differentiation between the roles. But I guess I think it's important for us to acknowledge that when we're looking for people, that we should like take seriously what they say they want to do. In terms of the difference, I mean, I think there's a lot of fluidity between them. And that's why I think it's important to say aspirationally, we call the folks on my team data scientists. Most of the work is probably what we call data engineering. I don't think I'd draw a bright line distinction between them, though. I think that if the distinction between data engineering and data science is a technical one about like the methodologies that you use, are you doing machine learning, or are you doing complex data management processes? I think that makes it really mechanical in a way that I don't know if it serves us. In either situation, you're profiling information, you're asking questions of data, you have to be responsive to the things that your stakeholders need. And I think doing data engineering, I don't know, maybe this is provocative, but I think doing data engineering is a kind of data science. And I think that doing data engineering is also foundational. I think that performing data science also involves doing a lot of data engineering. So I don't think I would draw a super bright line, but I do think that people who are hiring and people who are leading teams and people who are doing the work need to have really serious, honest conversations about what kind of work does this role need? And does that look like the stuff that I want to do, the stuff that I've trained for, the stuff that I've, envisioned myself doing? And if not, then yeah, I think you need to be really honest about, okay, maybe it's not the right fit. But I think that they're so tightly linked that it's really hard to differentiate in a clean way. I don't know if that helps, Tiffany.
No, I think that this was kind of the discussion that we had. It's kind of hard to distinguish between what these different rules are and define what you would be doing. And yeah, so thank you.
And yeah, you're welcome. And I guess just to be really clear, I guess I don't want to suggest that they're interchangeable or that there isn't some uniqueness of the skill sets. I think because there's potentially so much overlap, I think people have to be really clear about what's involved in this job and what do I want to do, and be really honest and serious about those kinds of things. Because for sure, you do there are lots and lots of different kinds of work to do in this whole agglomerated thing of data science and data engineering. Businesses need to be really honest about what they need, and they need to understand it seriously. And, the rest of us need to think about, does that fit with what we want to do? and can we get the job there?
I love all this conversation about being really honest about what they're going to do in that role, but also for somebody looking for the role, making sure it's clear what you really want to be doing too. Mm-hmm. On the topic of job postings and hiring too, Jackie, I see you asked a question earlier too. Do you want to jump in?
Oh, which question was that?
I think it was about computer science as a preferred degree.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your views are on. Was it?
I can read it too. I think it was.
Go ahead. I don't remember.
Have it handy.
I see job postings state computer science as a preferred degree. What's the view on self-taught versus formal education?
I mean, I'm a sociologist, and I convinced people that I could do this stuff. So I'm biased towards saying I don't think computer science should be a preferred degree. A couple people on my team have CS backgrounds and degrees, and they're great. I don't think it's the only way to be successful. I mean, I think if you look around the community, there are, so many, this community that our studio and Posit has been such I think, foundational positive part of. There are all these people who come into this kind of work without that background, and they're great. And so for me, I want to be really encouraging of not needing to come through that particular pipeline. It doesn't exclude you, of course, but I think there are tons and tons of ways to come at it without, there are all kinds of people who are super technical and do really fascinating, complex, interesting technical stuff who don't come out of computer science. They come from, history and literature and social science. So, that's obviously my baggage, right? But yeah, I don't think you should need a CS degree.
Thanks, Alan. I see there's quite a conversation happening in the chat right now, which I love when there's a conversation going on in the chat too. I can't catch up quick enough, but I think there was another question you had asked earlier, Libby, about community or knowledge sharing. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't think I could even scroll back to find that, but I was asking if Gore had any type of internal data science community or knowledge sharing stuff set up. And I think that the other part of my question was kind of like the value that you put on good communication inside of an engineering role. Like, are your roles business partner roles where like that's really important for relationship building? Two-parter, sorry.
Yeah. On the community one, I think we're working on it. We have my team is a little bit unique in structure within our enterprise right now, but there are individuals and other teams sort of forming, and we have some of them are in whole other businesses, and so we don't necessarily have a natural connectivity to them, but we're aware of we're aware of them out there. We're trying to build some sort of networking so that we can, share good practices, or at least see each other as peers out there doing similar work, even if it's not the same work, or even if our tools and stuff are really different. So I guess I'd say yes. Sometimes Gore feels like a really big company, and it feels like it's hard to connect to those sorts of folks. And other times it's really natural, and we can, reach out and collaborate and communicate. Maybe young, I guess, in that sense, Libby, like the real formal sense of community. Within our NPD analytics team, I think we have a great sense of community. It's a really good team to be a part of, even though my team is a piece of the whole. And in terms of the second part of your question about sort of the partnership, I think that we're successful because we are such close partners to our customers. We don't right now. I'm sort of figuring out with the folks on my team, should a person on my team be dedicated to doing work with our quality organization, for example, or does my team kind of float and sort of fill needs as they come up on projects? And I think there are pros and cons of both of those. But thinking about your question of what does the partnership look like, I think we do well when we have good, close relationships with our customers, and that means that as data folks, we understand the business, we understand the functional needs, so that we don't have to, so that they trust us. They know that we understand their problems enough to help to solve them. So yeah, I think the partnership is close. Whether it's dedicated or not, I think we're going to figure out. But I think it's important for us to feel like we're part of the organization that's like substantively doing the work. So maybe that's where the value of the partnership is really, really important. We're the data team, but we're part of an analytics team that is deeply, deeply embedded in the business and the functions that we work with. And I think that's good for us. And good for them too. I think it's good for everybody.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Like having people that can really build relationships with the people who are the end users of whatever you're doing is so important. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I see, Marlene, you had mentioned you had a great visual that helps you understand how data science is not one thing. So I'd love to see that at some point. But I also see, Megan, you had a great comment as well about that previous conversation. I was wondering if you wanted to share that here too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just found that I hadn't asked questions when I was interviewing as a candidate around what the difference is in the job role around like what the core work would be versus maybe projects that sounded really flashy but were not a bulk of the work. So just yeah, just a suggestion to keep in mind as you're interviewing to understand as a data analyst or scientist what kind of those differences are might be a good question just to make sure it's something that you want to be doing like on a daily basis or something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think asking as a candidate, what's the day to day? You know, what do most days look like? Is really important. And then also as an interviewer, having people on the interview team who can speak directly to that is really important. You know, so when we're hiring, you know, we always have sort of analyst kind of customer facing folks on the team to be able to explain like what do our customers need, and also at least someone from my team who can answer that question, what's the day to day like, because that's really important.
Mike, I see you asked two great questions, so maybe whichever one you like best first.
I was hooking back into what you were talking about in project management. I think it's fair to say that there's probably a lot of people on the call who effectively are doing their own project management within their own team. So outside of the kind of budgeting aspect, which is, I think, probably a different conversation, but do you have any quick wins or quick tips on the kind of management side of project management rather than that kind of more formal discipline?
That's a good question. Quick wins in project management. I guess.
Or stakeholder management might be another way of thinking of it.
We talk a lot, maybe two things that I can try and say really quickly. We talk a lot within my team and the bigger analytical team about feeling comfortable pushing back on requests and saying, what are you going to do with this deliverable? What are you going to do different, or what's going to be value added because of it? That is a really helpful clarifying question, not only in terms of managing scope, but also in terms of better understanding what success looks like. Because often the thing that they say they're going to do isn't necessarily a direct line from what they asked for. So being confident enough and having enough credibility as a big team to ask that, I think is really, really good for us. And then you can get into the more detailed kind of project management stuff. And I think I said I had two thoughts there, and I have no recollection now what the second one is. But that one for us, I think, is a really important. Reaching a milestone where we could push back in terms of scope was, I think, a really significant one for us. And the way that I think we crystallize that is to say, okay, what are you going to do? You know, help us define that. And I think that's really, really a key one.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because you go from what do you think you're asking for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To what are you actually needing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tell us how you're going to act if we make this thing, or if we give you A versus B, what do you do differently? Is really key for everybody, I think.
Thank you so much for all these awesome questions. I want to make sure that there isn't something that I've missed or like really pressing question you want to make sure you ask here. So feel free to just like unmute yourself and jump in too. I think we got everything. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. This was great.
Thank you. This is fun. And slightly self-indulgently, just real quick, having this community sort of being able to be a part of over the last year or so has been really great, super validating. Congrats Posit on being Posit. That's such a big milestone and really fun. And you all are a big part, I think, of why so many of us feel like this is a community we can be a part of. So I'm really, really grateful. And this was really fun to chat with everybody. Super happy to talk more if folks want to find me. Really happy to look around and like feel like a peer to a bunch of folks. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alan. I was just saying that today when I was sharing on LinkedIn, like it's so fun seeing, like getting to meet somebody for the very first time that comes into this space, and then seeing people like come back and get to know each other too, and feeling like we all really know each other and have met in person, even though I haven't met everybody in person yet.
Right.
But yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all. Take care.
Rachel, I posted the visual I talked about on my LinkedIn. Yeah. And then there's a second visual that I'll put up really soon too that helps. I think it's from Data Camp. It really shows like the difference between what, at least somebody has a guideline, right? Architect versus engineer versus scientist versus analyst, database admin. And so I'm using it to help my company to kind of understand that there's no one ring to rule them all, right? You need multiple people to help handle some of this workload or at least understand it. But Alan, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing all your candid insights and experience. It's been awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure, Marlene. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Yeah, and Marlene, I'll take that post over and make sure it goes into the group too. So if we want to continue a conversation on that too, I feel like there's a lot of thoughts to be shared there.
Sure. Thanks, Rachel.
Cool. Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
everybody.